Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to today's edition of HFY, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called Come From Away, written by Saxophoneyeti. A bit over 25 years after first contact, things were pretty normal here on Earth. The diplomats at the UN had negotiated some kind of provisional status with the local planetary federation, and every once in a while, some aliens would land in Beijing or Sao Paulo or The Hague. The news would make a big deal about it, and then they'd leave, and then the news would move on. Sure, the eggheads down at Cape Canaveral could get up into space and talk to aliens and everything, but for normal people, accountants were still accountants, waiters were still waiters, and Greg was still an air traffic controller. Greg woke up to his alarm that morning, before the sunrise. He groaned and hesitated a moment before rolling out of bed. It was Tuesday, and he had another 4 shifts before the weekend. His fiancée was out of town, in New York. She was at some conference that her job had paid for. Zeno something. Greg's fiancée worked at the university up the road, and she was much smarter than Greg was. Greg was proud of that, even if her parents weren't. He made himself coffee and got dressed for the day. Greg's brother had talked about flying cars and global unification after first contact, but that hadn't happened yet. Greg thought about the movies that he'd seen as a kid as he put on a light jacket, and he hoped that one day he'd own a flying car. Greg walked to the train station, tapped his watch on the entry pad, and pushed through the metal turnstile. Greg touched his headphones, and the book he was listening to last night resumed, and the ka-chunk of the train faded into the background. As Greg walked through the airport, the light was starting to shine through the tall windows, and the first passengers from red-eye flights were arriving. The loudspeakers were announcing the first arrivals of the day, and the muffled echoes bounced through the mostly empty hallways. Greg stepped into an elevator, tapped his security tag to the reader, and it rose up to the tower. It was shaping up to be just another fall Tuesday. The night shift guy grabbed his mug and nodded wordlessly to Greg, who nodded back before taking over his seat. Greg typed in his login credentials to the computer in front of him, slipped the oversized headset on, and adjusted the microphone to sit comfortably in front of his face. As he began to direct planes, Greg didn't hear the phone ringing behind him. He didn't notice the conversation between the shift manager and the person on the line, and he didn't see how his shift manager's shoulders dropped suddenly. He only noticed when the manager tapped his shoulder and told him that something was going on, and that he should tell the pilots to be on alert without alarming their passengers. Greg passed the message along and took a moment to think about where he was sitting. He looked down, out the window and onto the tarmac, bathed in the oranges and reds of a rising sun, and he saw the highways and train tracks stretching into the city. The sky was clear and blue, and there was barely a cloud in sight. He thought about all the people that had passed underneath his office today, near the terminals of the airport, and he felt a twinge of fear in his stomach. Then a light in his console lit up red, and his headphones quietly beeped. Greg reached over and turned the dial until he could hear the message at a frequency he never used before. Ship Lithium Star, we are an unarmed transport vessel carrying civilians. Repeat, we are an unarmed civilian transport. Can anyone hear us? The subspace buoy is showing that the central armed space lane has been closed. Can anyone confirm? We don't have the fuel to make it to another jump point and need a place to land. We have limited supplies of food and cannot spend much time in space without resupply. Please, if anyone is hearing this, please respond. This message repeats. This is the starship Lithium Star. Greg flipped the switch and spoke. Lithium Star, this is O'Hare Flight Control. We copy. What is your position, relative to, Solar Sol 3 planetary orbital position? Over? The shift manager had perked up and walked over and was listening intently. Greg switched to speakers and moved the headphone down to rest between his shoulders and neck. This was new. Nobody had ever needed help from space, as far as Greg knew. His brother said aliens don't care about Earth because we've got nothing to trade, so why should they stop here? We're just some backwater hicks to them, some boring midpoint between 2 big empires that have more stuff and money than we do. And yet, the speaker crackled to life again. Oh, here, Control, this is Lithium Star. We are roughly 72 degrees, Mark 235 degrees from Sol 3, standard polar reference. Fuel is dangerously low. I am declaring a Class 2 emergency and requesting immediate landing clearance to a galactic standard hangar. Over. We, do not have one of those. Greg's boss was dialing up the phone and desperate to get a hold of someone on the other end who knew how to handle a situation like this. Can you breathe oxygen? There was a moment of silence on the other end. We breathe oxygen, confirm. Galactic standard hangars have an inert gas at 75% pressure with 25% oxygen and around 5% margin of error for trace gases. Do you have a hangar that matches that, mostly? Greg thought for a moment. There was a space station, but he didn't know how to call NASA and tell them to expect visitors. Besides, he didn't even know how big the ship was. Probably not a good idea to have them show up unannounced at a science outpost that hosted a few dozen people at a time. Greg looked over at his boss, who shrugged. No one was picking up on the other end of the phone. Lithium Star, this is O'Hare Control. Are you able to land on a planet? I mean, is re-entry something your ship can do? Over. O'Hare, Lithium Star confirmed. We are re-entry capable. All starships in lanes are. Over. Lithium Star, stand by for approach directions. Greg's boss's eyes went wide, and the whole office seemed to fall silent. Do you have the location of the signal on Sol 3? Copy. We have signal location. Okay, good. About, how big is your vessel? Over. We have a Spec-D light personnel transport, barely 2 kilometers long. Fucking Christ. One of the other operators said, as Greg got nauseous. 2 kilometers. Where the hell was he going to put something that huge? Lithium Star, there's going to be a big water lake, a few kilometers from the signal. Can you see that? Copy, Control. I'm going to clear a column for you to come down, right near the south side of that lake. It's the one that's furthest away from the reference pole. Over. As soon as the words were out of Greg's mouth, his colleagues went to work. Flight paths were diverted away from Lake Michigan, and a no-fly zone was put into place within seconds. Someone even had the sense to call the mayor's office and have them activate the city's emergency alert system, so people on the streets didn't think the world was ending when a massive spaceship fell out of the sky. Understood, Control, before approach. Do you know why they closed the lane? I wouldn't know, Lithium Star, sorry. We'll tell you whatever information we have once you're on the ground. You're cleared to approach. The shift manager had finally managed to get through to someone on the federal government, and the wheels of bureaucracy began to turn. Military forces were placed on alert, diplomats were woken up, and sensitive personnel were taken to secure locations. A ship that big had never come to Earth before, and the world was in for a rude awakening when it screamed down like a flaming brick over Chicago. When the smoke cleared and the heat shields began to cool, the ship hovered over the lake like a mountain over a prairie. Green and black helicopters circled the massive ship, and fireboats sprayed arcs of rain onto the streaming hull. Sonic booms cracked overhead as jets secured the airspace like gnats on a rotting carcass. Greg slumped down in his chair, letting out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Lithium Star, this is O'Hare Control. Welcome to Earth, over. Switch to UHF band frequency 2600 for further communication. Thanks, Control. You just saved a lot of lives today. Lithium Star out. Greg smiled. This was a story he'd tell his grandkids, if he had them. Did he want grandkids? Did he want kids? He needed to call his wife, fiancée. She would have a lot of questions. This time, Greg thought, he might even have a couple answers for her. Greg's boss clapped him across the back in congratulations. Apparently, he said, something big happened in one of those alien empires down the way. The SETI folks are telling me that there's a whole moon missing. Nobody knows what caused it, or who, and they shut down the hyperlanes into their space while they figure out what's going on. First time in 1,000 generations, apparently, so it's a bit of a big deal. Shouldn't concern us much, which is fine by me, because that was enough excitement for a lifetime. Greg, take the rest of the week. Greg turned around to see what made his boss pause. The red light was flashing again. He looked around, and all the red lights around the tower were flashing. He flipped through the monitored frequencies and listened. Hello, this is the Imperial Wind. We don't have... Our supply of air is only rated for 2 days. We can't hold here much. And he's about to give birth. We need a doctor. I heard the Empire's at war. Are we under attack? They don't have anywhere to go. Yeah, we need a place to dock. Please, there is no one else in range. No other jump gates declaring. What's going on? We've lost communications. Can anyone hear me? All around the tower, the air traffic controllers were picking up dozens of distress calls, with space lines into the Empire closed off just ahead. There was no telling how many people were about to pass through the system, and they all needed somewhere to go. Like his colleagues around the room, the countless other airports around the world, Greg picked up his headphones one more time. This is O'Hare Control. We can hear you. Do you need a place to land? Over. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.